Okay, so here we go. First thing I have to do is bring the GPS points of the river into a polyline shapefile. And the reason being that this is going to be a text file of points. And this question, both of these questions, basically ask us for spatial relationships to a linear river. Okay, so let's just do that. I'm going to open up a new arc map. And the first thing I'm going to do is this kind of awkward home directory routine. So I want week 7 part 1 as my home directory. And I'm going to save this map as something I want saved in that working directory I just asked for. And then I'm going to, so I'll call this week 7 part 1, problem 1 I should say. And then after it's saved, I'm going to close it and open it again, following the procedure of establishing your home directory. Okay, so now I'm going to go into our catalog, and I want to bring the GPS points into the map. You have two options. One is a CSV file, the other is an XML. The XML is going to be, I believe, metadata. The CSV just means it's a comma delineated file, and or a text file, and it's going to have our GPS points. I'm going to drag and drop that in, and it's not going to look like much happened. But if you go into the table of contents and right click and open up the attribute table, you'll see that you have a column of the feature identifier, so that's left null, and that's probably going to be something that ARC complains about shortly here. ID just is, I think I made that column and just called it 1 in the sense that I want all of these points to be one track. And then we've got your lat and your long. And so that all looks good. So what we'd like to do is convert that from a table into a shape, or basically into a shapefile eventually, so that we can look at it. And the first step that we're going to do is make an event file by right-clicking and saying display XY data. And it's going to ask us for the X field and the Y field. So is that correct, or do I need to switch them? It's also going to ask us for the coordinate system. So basically, what this dialog is saying is that the coordinate for my um, X field is stored in this field, and the coordinates for my Y field are stored in this field, and then my coordinates refer to this coordinate system that I need to tell it. I'll tell you that it's the WGS 84 geographic coordinate system. I usually don't like drawing directly from favorites, period. And so I'm gonna go into geographic coordinate systems and go to world and WGS 84, and it probably didn't make a difference, but sometimes I'm not an untrusting person, but I'm not particularly trusting of GIS. And so at this point we have our GCS set at 1984, and we have our longitude from the X field, which makes sense, and our latitude from the Y field, that makes sense. And sure, I'm going to say, and I think because that's checked, yep, it's warned me of something. So it does not have an object ID field, so you'll not be able to select, query, or edit the features in the resulting layer. And that's okay. We're getting this because our table did not have a unique identifier for each point, and that's going to keep it from being able to select, query, or edit. And you might be frustrated by that, but I can just say we don't have to sweat it because we're going to go from this. So now if you opened up the attribute table, you'd see that we don't have a unique identifier for each one of these points, which is fine, I believe. We're going to, and I say not a unique identifier, right? Because this is not unique. It's the one is repeating over and over and over again. So I'm going to right click on this and say basically right now we're just viewing these points, kind of we're displaying them more or less on the fly. And what I'd like to do is write a shape file a point shapefile that has all of these points. So to do that, I'm going to right click and say Data, Export Data. And I want to export all of these features, and I'd like to put it in my home directory. And this was a naming convention that two of you showed me a couple weeks back that I thought was quite clever, that you just start with the O as in Oxford, and then the number 1, and this will kind of work for you. So I'm going to say GPS points from table, and say OK, and yep, so we now have let's see, we've got points that are in the WGS84, which is what we wanted. One thing you'll notice is that because we added this as a table to our map, we got shifted over to list by source when you're probably used to being list by drawing order. And one of the results of being in the list by source is that you can't move the layers in your label or in your table of contents. So if you find yourself kind of locked into shuffling things around, you'll just want to click over to this, and now you can move these one on top of the other, but you'll notice that you can't display a table when you're in the list by drawing order. You can only really display a table when you're over here. Okay, so at this point though, because this is the same as that, which you can verify just visually, alright, so I'm going to remove this event file layer and then go back over to here and zoom out. So now we're almost done. We've displayed the XY data, we've exported to a shapefile. Now I'd like to convert this point file into a line file. And so to do that, I'm going to go grab a tool, and you can go to Arc Toolbox or you can use search, but it's that library bit where I'd like you to be able to see what tools are next to the tool that you're interested in, because that's going to allow you to kind of discover things that you wouldn't otherwise. So if you go under, and this is also kind of handy that you can access the toolbars in the Arc Catalog window. So if you go into Tools and Systems, and let's see, I think it's Database Management, and then, and go under Features. There's going to be a tool called Points to Line. Go ahead and double click on that. And this is going to create line features from points, which is exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to load up the O1 GPS points from table. And I'm going to call this week 7 O2 river line from GPS points. And I'm going to leave these two empty. And it's going to work, I think, better for us if we just leave these two empty and just say OK. And this should run through and eventually kick out a line. So that was kind of pretty cool. We went from a table to a point shapefile to now a single line. And if we looked at the attributes of this single line, we'd say that it has the identity of 0. Basically, that's its name, 0, and it's a polyline. And then this is just often the kind of default first field that Arc creates with a shapefile. It's just called ID. And let's just look at this, open the attribute table, and see here what we've done is this was the FID from our table, which was blank. And now the point file that we made from that table has this feature ID, and each point has a unique ID. So that's something that was lacking in our original table, which is why we got that original pop-up error. And so I think we're good to go here. That completes this step. We've done these 3 implements. We created a polyline, and we've talked briefly about a FID or an object ID, which is a unique identifier for each instance of a feature. So each point, or each line, in this case there's only one,